I rented the lake house because I wanted silence. Not peace exactly. Silence was more practical. Silence meant no coworkers dropping messages into my inbox every 10 minutes. No neighbors arguing through apartment walls. No friends deciding I needed to be dragged out for drinks because I had spent too many evenings with my laptop. I had 5 weeks, one overdue editing project, and a rental sitting alone beside a broad stretch of water that looked almost unreal in the afternoon light. The owner's son met me when I arrived. "My dad got stuck in town," he explained as he handed me the keys. "I'm Noah. Daniel." He walked me through the basics, the fuse box, the kitchen, the temperamental lock on the back door, the path down to the dock. He was easygoing without being intrusive, which I appreciated immediately. "I probably won't need much," I told him. Noah glanced toward the laptop bag I had already set beside the porch door. "Working vacation?" "More working than vacation." He nodded. "Then I'll try not to disturb you." That sounded perfect. By late afternoon, I had unpacked, opened my manuscript, and claimed the porch table overlooking the lake as my office. I made coffee and settled into the kind of uninterrupted quiet I had been imagining for weeks. Less than 2 hours later, a truck came up the gravel drive. I looked up from my screen. Noah stepped out. For a second, I wondered if I had forgotten something important during the tour. He came onto the porch carrying a screwdriver. "Sorry," he said. "I remembered the screen latch in the guest room was loose. Dad asked me to check it before anyone stayed here." "You remembered that after you left?" His mouth curved slightly. "Apparently." The repair took maybe 3 minutes. When he came back through the living room, his eyes landed on my coffee cup. "You found the good spot." "The porch." "For working." I nodded. He paused near the door. "Still taking it black?" I looked at him. "You remember that? You said it earlier." I had, while he was showing me the kitchen. I just hadn't expected him to notice. Noah lifted one shoulder, suddenly seeming almost self-conscious. "Anyway, latch is fixed." "Thanks." He headed for his truck, and I watched him cross the yard before forcing myself to look back at the manuscript. It was probably nothing. A conscientious owner's son remembering a small repair. Completely reasonable. Still, when the sound of his truck disappeared down the road, the lake house felt noticeably quieter than it had before he came back. The next morning, I was halfway through a chapter when I heard the truck again. I stared through the porch screen as Noah climbed out carrying a small package. This time I checked the clock. 9:17. He knocked anyway. "Morning. Something else broken?" His smile appeared immediately. "Smoke detector batteries." I glanced toward the ceiling. "It hasn't made a sound." "Preventive maintenance." "Of course." Noah replaced the batteries while I stood beneath the detector watching him. The entire job took less time than making coffee. Before leaving, he glanced toward the porch. "How's the manuscript?" "Still losing a fight with me." "You'll win." "You sound very confident for someone who hasn't read it." "I'm confident about you." He seemed to realize how that sounded at exactly the same moment I did. Noah cleared his throat. "I mean, you came all the way out here to finish it. Right? Right?" He left. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Later that afternoon, Noah appeared again near the dock while I was taking a break. He explained that the ladder could get slippery and showed me where the lower rung shifted slightly underweight. The warning was useful. It also could have taken 30 seconds. Noah stayed several minutes longer. The following day, I found him walking toward the porch with a package of coffee filters. "I noticed yesterday you were almost out." I looked from the filters to him. "You keep inventory on renters' coffee supplies?" "My dad likes people looked after." "Your father sounds extremely committed to customer service." Noah laughed and handed me the package. I leaned against the porch railing. "Is this place always this high maintenance?" "What do you mean?" "In 3 days, you've fixed a latch, replaced batteries that weren't dead, inspected a ladder that still works, and personally delivered coffee filters. When you list it like that, I sound very dedicated." "That's one word." His eyes held mine for a beat longer than necessary. "You said you wanted to be left alone," he reminded me. I did. So I'm bothering you? The obvious answer should have been yes. Instead, I hesitated. Noah noticed. That amused little curve returned to his mouth. I'll keep it professional, he said. Please do. He started down the steps. I carried the filters inside, returned to the porch, and opened the manuscript again. For the next hour, I worked without interruption. Exactly what I had wanted. Then somewhere in the distance, an engine sounded on the road, and before I could stop myself, I looked up. It wasn't Noah's truck. I stared at the empty driveway for another second before lowering my eyes to the screen. Apparently, Noah Bennett's visits had become predictable quickly enough that I had already started listening for the next one. A few days later, I heard Noah's truck while I was working and knew it was his before I even looked up. That bothered me less than it should have. He walked past the porch instead of coming inside, heading toward the dock with a small tool bag. I gave myself almost 5 minutes before curiosity won. Another emergency? I called as I approached. Noah glanced over his shoulder, checking the dock after the wind. I looked across the perfectly calm lake. The devastating wind? You should have seen it earlier. I was here earlier. That made him laugh. His inspection was exactly as thorough as I had started expecting. A few boards tested under his boots, 2 screws tightened, 1 handrail given an experimental shake. Within minutes, he was finished. Crisis avoided? I asked. Barely. We walked back toward the house together. On the porch, Noah noticed me pushing against one corner of the outdoor table. The warped leg had started rocking whenever I typed. Hold on. Before I could tell him it wasn't necessary, he crouched beside it and pulled a screwdriver from his bag. You know, I said, every time you fix something, I become more convinced you're creating future problems just to stay employed. My father doesn't pay me enough for that level of planning. So you admit there's planning involved. Noah looked up at me, smiling. Nice try. I held the table steady while he adjusted the leg. Our teasing continued until the wobble disappeared. Noah stood, tested the table once, then closed his tool bag. There was nothing left for him to do. Neither of us moved. He looked toward the lake. Not a bad office. You sound jealous. Maybe I am. I should have let him leave. Instead, I heard myself ask, coffee. His gaze came back to me. For the first time, I was the one manufacturing a reason for him to stay. Black? He asked. For me. You can have yours however you want. Black works. I brought out 2 mugs, and we sat on the porch overlooking the water. Noah told me he had grown up around the lake, spending summers learning every dock, trail, and stubborn piece of equipment his father expected him to help maintain. He still handled things when needed, though he had his own life nearby now. I told him just enough about editing for him to understand why I could spend an entire afternoon arguing silently with 1 paragraph. At some point, I stopped thinking about the manuscript waiting behind us. When I finally checked the time, almost an hour had disappeared. I looked toward the dock. For something damaged by all that wind, it seemed remarkably intact. Noah took a slow drink of coffee. Good construction. That must be it. He smiled into his mug. Neither of us said what I was beginning to wonder. When Noah eventually left, I returned to my laptop. The porch was quiet again. But this time, I couldn't pretend Noah had been the only one finding reasons to make his visit last longer. A few evenings later, Noah arrived carrying a lantern. I was on the porch with my laptop when he held it up as if presenting evidence in his own defense. Spare. I looked past him toward the kitchen window. There's already one inside. That one's older. It works. This one works better. I closed my laptop halfway. Your excuses are getting worse. Noah leaned against the porch post. Excuses. The screen latch was believable. The batteries were questionable. The dock inspection was ambitious. Coffee filters were suspicious. Now you're delivering backup lanterns. You forgot the outdoor faucet. I was trying to spare you. Earlier that week, he had spent several minutes inspecting a faucet I had used perfectly well that morning. Noah set the lantern on the porch table. I take property maintenance seriously. I'm beginning to think you personally inspect every molecule on the property. Only the unreliable ones. And somehow they all become unreliable while I'm here. His expression shifted into that familiar restrained smile. If my visits bother you this much, he said, why do you keep asking me to stay after I finish? That stopped me. Noah waited. I could have reminded him that I had invited him for coffee only once. I could have told him conversation was simply preferable to watching him invent another repair. Instead, I opened my laptop again. That's what I thought, he said. I looked up sharply, but he was already laughing. For once, the house rescued me from answering. A dull metallic knock carried up from the dock. Noah's amusement vanished. He turned toward the water. That one's real. We went down together. A fitting along the dock had loosened enough to let part of the hardware shift whenever the water moved beneath it. Noah crouched to inspect it, then opened his tool bag. I held the lantern while he worked. By the time he tightened the fitting, daylight had faded across the lake. The joking between us softened with it. You really did come here to disappear, didn't you? Noah asked. For 5 weeks. Why? I watched the lantern light move across the boards. Because work is easier when nothing can interrupt it. That doesn't sound like the whole answer. I glanced at him. Noah wasn't teasing now. I exhaled. I like knowing what my days are going to look like. Work, dinner, sleep, repeat. People complicate schedules. People, some more than others. His eyes met mine. I looked away first. Noah sat back against one of the dock posts. I get it. You don't seem like someone who avoids people. I don't. He looked across the darkening water. But I like this place better when it's quiet. After summer, when everyone leaves, you can actually hear the lake again. That sounds suspiciously like solitude. Maybe I only like it in controlled doses. I smiled. Amateur. He laughed softly. The repair was finished. I knew it because his tools were already back in the bag. Still, Noah remained beside me, and I remained beside him. For once, he had a perfectly legitimate reason to have come. Standing there in the fading light, close enough that I had become intensely aware of the space between our shoulders, I realized that neither of us seemed particularly interested in that reason anymore. We stayed on the dock until the last usable light disappeared. By then, the loose fitting was fixed, Noah's tools were packed, and there was no practical reason for either of us to remain there. When he finally stood, I picked up the lantern. You want coffee? I asked. Noah looked at me for a second. I thought people complicated schedules. They do. And yet I'm offering you coffee. That smile returned, quieter this time. Then yes, we went back to the porch. I made 2 cups while Noah set his tool bag near the steps. When I came outside, he had taken the chair beside mine rather than the one across the table. I noticed. I was fairly certain he noticed me noticing. For a while, neither of us mentioned it. The lake had gone almost completely dark, leaving only faint reflections beyond the porch. Without a repair between us, the silence felt different. There was nothing for Noah to explain and nothing for me to pretend I needed help with. Eventually, I said, So what's tomorrow? He turned toward me. Tomorrow. Your reason. My reason for what? Coming back. Noah looked down at his coffee. I continued before I could lose my nerve. You always find something. A latch, batteries, a dock ladder, filters, a faucet, a lantern. The lantern was useful tonight. By accident. He laughed once, but it faded quickly. I watched him. Why do you keep finding things wrong with this place whenever I'm here? For the first time since I had met him, Noah seemed to have no easy answer. His thumb moved slowly along the edge of his mug. Maybe I'm thorough. That excuse was better 3 visits ago. His eyes lifted to mine. Something in his expression made the teasing disappear between us. Neither of us looked away. Noah leaned slightly closer. It wasn't enough to mistake for an accident. My pulse changed immediately. I could have moved back. I didn't. His gaze dropped briefly to my mouth, then returned to my eyes. The distance between us narrowed until I could feel the warmth of him beside me. For one suspended second, I was certain he was going to kiss me. I was equally certain I was going to let him. Then Noah stopped. So did I. We stayed there, close enough that pretending became impossible. Noah, I know. Do you? He gave a small, nervous laugh that sounded nothing like his usual confidence. I waited. He looked toward the lake, then back at me. Some of the things I've come over for might have been less necessary than others. That's all you're getting tonight. I should have pushed. Instead, I smiled. Coward. Probably. The word should have broken the tension. Didn't. Noah's expression softened. I look forward to coming here, he said. There was no joke underneath it. I felt every excuse I had made to myself collapse at once. I've started looking forward to it too. Neither of us moved closer again. Not because the attraction had disappeared, but because now we both knew exactly what crossing that final inch would mean. Eventually Noah stood and picked up his tool bag. At the steps, he looked back. Good night, Daniel. Good night. I watched his truck disappear down the gravel road. Then I sat alone on the porch, staring at a manuscript I could no longer concentrate on. Noah had not told me exactly why he kept coming back. But he had finally told me enough to make the safer explanation impossible. After that night, Noah did not disappear. That would have made things easier. Instead, he kept coming to the lake house, except the excuses seemed to lose their importance. Sometimes he mentioned something he wanted to check, but increasingly he would arrive and spend several minutes talking to me before either of us remembered he was supposedly there for the property. And I stopped pretending to mind. When I heard his truck, I closed the manuscript instead of resenting the interruption. Noah learned when I usually stopped working for coffee. He knew which porch chair I preferred and that when I stared at the lake for too long, I was probably stuck on a paragraph rather than admiring the view. I learned that certain parts of the shoreline could still make him talk about childhood summers without realizing how much time had passed. The almost kiss remained between us. We never dismissed it. We also never repeated it. That somehow made every ordinary moment more intimate. One afternoon, Noah was leaning against the porch railing while I finished a page when I asked how his father managed all these rental problems when Noah was unavailable. He calls someone if it's actually urgent, Noah said. My hands stopped above the keyboard. Actually urgent? Noah froze. I slowly turned toward him. He looked as though he had just realized what he had admitted. So your father doesn't expect you to personally inspect every suspicious faucet? No. Deliver emergency coffee filters? No. Protect innocent renters from functional lanterns? His mouth twitched. Definitely not. I closed the laptop. Noah. He looked toward the lake. How many of those visits were real? The first ones. That is not a number. The screen latch needed fixing. And after that? The batteries were worth replacing. Worth replacing? They would have needed it eventually. I stared at him until he laughed under his breath. Then his expression changed. The first visits were legitimate, he said. After that, sometimes Dad mentioned something that could be checked whenever, and I volunteered to do it immediately. Why? He met my eyes. This time he did not hide behind a joke. Because I wanted to see you. The answer landed harder than I expected, even though I had been moving toward it for days. The dock could have waited. The filters. I bought them. The faucet. Completely fine. I laughed, and Noah covered his face briefly with one hand. That one was bad. It was terrible. I was running out of ideas. The humor faded, leaving something warmer underneath. You could have just come over, I said. You told me you wanted to be left alone. That silenced me. Noah looked toward my laptop. You came here for 5 weeks to work. I figured if I had an actual reason to stop by, you could decide whether I stayed after I finished. I thought about the coffee I had offered him, the conversations I had extended. Every time I had complained about his visits while secretly listening for his truck. How much longer do you have? Noah asked. I glanced at the calendar beside my laptop. The answer suddenly felt different than it had when I arrived. Less than 2 weeks. Noah nodded. Neither of us said anything for a moment. I had finally gotten the answer I wanted. Noah had been coming because he wanted to see me, and now that I knew, the only thing I could think about was how soon he would no longer have a lake house renter to come see. 3 days later, I finished the manuscript. I stared at the final page for several seconds before closing the document. That should have felt like victory. For weeks, finishing the project had been the entire point of coming here. I had rented the lake house because I needed uninterrupted time, and now I had completed the work several days ahead of schedule. Instead of celebrating, I looked toward the driveway. Noah was coming by that afternoon. When his truck finally appeared, I was already on the porch. "You're done," he said almost immediately. I glanced at the closed laptop. "How did you know?" "You're not glaring at the screen. Apparently I have tells." "A few." I smiled, but the reason I had been waiting for him settled heavily in my chest. "I might leave early." Noah went still. "The project's finished," I explained. "There isn't much reason to stay until the scheduled checkout." For a moment, I expected him to tease me or manufacture some absurd argument about why the house required its tenant for several more days. He didn't. "If that makes sense for you," he said, "you should." His voice was calm enough to irritate me. "That's it." Noah's eyes met mine. "What do you want me to say?" I didn't know. That was the problem. He had spent weeks finding reasons to come here. I had spent almost as long pretending I didn't understand why. Now the excuses were gone. "I don't know," I said. Noah nodded once. "I'll let you pack." He left not long afterward. The next day he didn't come. I told myself that was normal. There was nothing to repair, nothing to deliver, and no reason for him to invent another inspection after finally admitting what the others had been. The second day was worse. Every distant engine made me look toward the road. None turned into the driveway. The silence I had paid for had finally become complete. I hated it. I worked without interruptions because there was no work left. I drank coffee alone on the porch. I walked down to the dock and remembered Noah beside me in the fading light, close enough to kiss and careful enough not to. By evening, I understood something I should have recognized earlier. The excuses had protected both of us. Noah could come because something supposedly needed attention. I could ask him to stay without admitting I wanted him there. Neither of us had ever needed to make the harder choice. Now there was nothing left to hide behind. I packed my clothes and put my laptop away. By the following morning, my bags were ready near the door. Checkout day. I made one final cup of coffee and stood on the porch looking across the lake. No message. No truck. No ridiculous maintenance emergency. Exactly the solitude I had asked for 5 weeks earlier. I carried my mug inside and looked at the packed bags. For the first time since arriving, leaving felt easier than staying. And for the first time, I wished Noah would find one more reason to stop me. By checkout morning, everything I owned was either zipped into a bag or sitting beside the front door. I carried the last box to my car, then stood beside the open trunk looking back at the lake house. 5 weeks earlier, I had arrived wanting nothing from this place except enough quiet to finish a manuscript. Now the manuscript was finished. The quiet had returned, and I was miserable. I shut the trunk. Gravel crunched somewhere behind me. My heart reacted before I turned around. Noah's truck came slowly up the driveway. I watched him park, trying not to feel relieved enough for it to show. He stepped out. No tool bag. No package. No batteries, filters, lantern, or anything else he could pretend the house required. Just Noah. I folded my arms. What broke this time? He stopped a few feet away. Nothing. The answer erased the smile I had been preparing. Noah glanced at my packed car, then back at me. "I stayed away because you said you were leaving. I noticed. I thought maybe I'd been pushing too much. You weren't. I didn't know that." He took a breath. "You came here because you wanted to be alone, Daniel. That mattered. The stupid maintenance excuses gave me a reason to show up, but once I was here, you got to decide whether I stayed." I thought about every repaired object followed by coffee. Every finished task followed by another conversation. "You could have told me that." I'm telling you now. Because I'm leaving? Because if I let you leave without saying it, then apparently I'm even more of a coward than you accused me of being. Despite myself, I smiled. No, it didn't. I wanted to see you, he said. That's why I kept coming. And when you told me you might leave early, I realized I didn't know how to come here anymore without hiding behind some reason. He looked briefly toward the house. So this time I don't have one. Something tightened in my chest. No tools. No emergency inspection? No, nothing suspicious happening to the faucet? That faucet has suffered enough. I laughed, but Noah stepped closer, and the humor fell away. I came because I don't want you to leave thinking this was just something that happened because you rented my dad's house. I held his gaze. What are you asking? One more day. The words were simple. Stay today. Not as a renter. Not because something needs fixing. He swallowed. Stay because I'm asking you on an actual date. There it was. No maintenance problem. No convenient task. No protection if I said no. And none for me either. I looked at my packed car. Then at the house where I had spent 5 weeks insisting that control and solitude were exactly what I wanted. Leaving would be easy. So I closed the distance between us. I can stay one more day. Noah exhaled, almost laughing with relief. Yeah. His eyes dropped to my mouth, just as they had that night on the porch. This time neither of us stopped. Noah leaned in slowly enough to give me every chance to move away. I didn't. I kissed him. For 1 second, he seemed startled that I had crossed the final distance first. Then his hand settled carefully at my waist and he kissed me back. When we separated, we stayed close. So, I said, this date. Noah smiled. I'll think of something. It better not involve checking the dock. No maintenance. Good. I glanced toward my car. The bags could stay there. Tomorrow I would leave the lake house. But for the first time since I had arrived, leaving the house no longer felt like leaving Noah. Today, nothing needed fixing. And I stayed anyway. A few hours later, my bags were still in the car. For once, I didn't care about the schedule. Noah kept his promise. There were no repairs, no inspections, no convenient reasons to linger at the house. We spent the day together because we had decided to, and the simplicity of that felt stranger and better than all the excuses that had brought us together. The next morning, I left the lake house. Leaving Noah was harder than leaving the place, but it no longer felt like an ending. We had already decided it wouldn't be. After I went home, Noah no longer needed a loose latch or questionable batteries to contact me. He called because he wanted to hear my voice. I called because I wanted to hear his. We made plans instead of waiting for circumstances to create them. And eventually I drove back to the lake. This time, there was no overdue manuscript on the passenger seat. No 5-week escape from my normal life. No rental period I could use to explain why I was there. Noah had invited me, and I had come because I wanted to see him. His truck was already parked beside the lake house when I arrived. I stepped out and looked toward the porch. Noah came through the door, smiling the moment he saw me. The sight of him still gave me that same ridiculous feeling I used to get whenever his truck appeared unexpectedly in the driveway. Except now I didn't have to pretend it annoyed me. He walked down the steps. Toward me. I looked deliberately past him at the house. Noah stopped. What? I narrowed my eyes at the porch, then the roof, as if searching for evidence of some disaster. So what needs fixing this time? He laughed. Nothing. No loose screen. No dead batteries? No dangerous faucet? Still functioning heroically. Doc emergency? Daniel. I looked back at him. His expression softened. Nothing needs fixing, he said. I just wanted to see you. There it was. The reason that had been hiding underneath every other reason from the beginning. Only now neither of us needed to hide it. I stepped forward, caught the front of his shirt lightly in my hand, and kissed him. No hesitation this time. No stopping an inch apart. No pretending the moment belonged to a temporary rental or a quiet lake or a summer interruption. When I pulled back, Noah was smiling. You know, he said, I could probably find something wrong with the dock if you need an excuse to stay. I looked toward the lake, then back at him. I think we're done with excuses. His hand found mine. Good. 5 weeks earlier, I had come to the lake house because I wanted to be left alone. Now I followed Noah toward the porch because neither of us needed a reason for me to stay.